It's July 4th, 1776, and the Founding Fathers have just finished writing the most important document in American history. They call it the Constitution. Just kidding. They actually called it the Declaration of Independence, and America wouldn't become the United States until 1783, when the British officially lost the Revolutionary War. But that's a whole other video. Anyway, today we're talking about the birth of a nation, the United States of America. So, how did these 13 colonies become their own country? Well, as we've been learning, the American Revolution was not exactly a walk in the park. Sure, the colonists had the home field advantage and knew these woods like the back of their powdered wigs. But they were fighting against the most powerful military in the world. So to level the playing field a bit, they had to be really smart about how they fought. In fact, there is this one battle you might have heard of called the Battle of Yorktown, where General George Washington and his buddy General Comte de Rochambeau decided to surround the British and their allies from the north and south. Kind of like a big hug. But before they could do that, they needed to get their forces from here to here without tipping off the British. So they did what any reasonable military would do. They made up a fake fort and filled it with soldiers. See, the British were watching this area very closely because they knew something important might happen. So by building a fort right over here, Washington was able to sneak his troops past the British and surprise attack them from the north. Then Rochambeau came in from the south with his troops and trapped the British in this little peninsula. It's honestly a pretty brilliant strategy if you think about it. Like, you almost feel bad for the British because they had absolutely no idea what hit them. But that's war for you. Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Anyway, after the British surrendered at Yorktown in 1781, everyone pretty much agreed that Britain should just give up on this whole America thing. But it took a while to make it official. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed and the United States became its own country. Now, even though the war was over and the Americans had won, they still had to figure out how they were going to run this brand new country. Like what kind of government they wanted and how they were gonna deal with each other and stuff. So they got together and wrote a thing called the Articles of Confederation. This established the United States as a nation with a government and everything. And it established rules for how the states would interact with each other. Basically, it was like the Constitution, but before the Constitution. As the United States grew and changed, the Articles of Confederation didn't really keep up with it. For example, as more people moved to the United States, more states were added. By 1789, there were 30. But the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 established a template for how new states could join the Union. And by the early 1800s, there were 20 states, but adding new states created problems. For example, some states had more power than others. See, each state had one vote in Congress, regardless of how many people lived there. So a small state like New Hampshire had the same amount of power as a gigantic state like Virginia. Also, there was no precedent or national court system. And honestly, the whole central government was kind of weak. So, in 1787, delegates met at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia to draft a new governing document. They argued over representation and taxes and slavery and all sorts of stuff. But ultimately, they created a new constitution for the United States. This established a federal republic with a president as the head of the country and an elaborate court system underneath him. It also created a two-house legislature with representation based on population. Although, to be fair, they did keep the whole one state, one vote thing for the Senate. Anyway, the Constitution went into effect in 1789. and the United States has been going strong ever since. So I hope you enjoyed this super long episode. And remember, if you want to learn more about the amazing story of the United States, there's a link to a great resource in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.